Welcome to the Deep Dive, where today we're really diving into a topic that I think is so fascinating, and honestly one that I think we as veterinary professionals, we like to think we know a lot about, but I think this is going to blow your mind today. We're talking about pain in cattle.
Absolutely.
Now, before you click away and think, oh, this is just another animal welfare episode, I promise you we're going way deeper. We're talking about the nitty-gritty, the cutting-edge research on how cattle actually experience pain, what it means for their well-being, and how this knowledge is really changing the game in veterinary medicine.
Yeah.
So, expert speaker, I've been like really digging into this research, and I have to say some of the things I've learned have been really eye-opening, even for a vet like myself. To kind of kick things off, though, let's address the elephant in the room, or should I say the cow in the pasture. When we talk about pain in animals, it's a lot more complex than just a simple, like, oh, that hurts, right?
Absolutely. And I think, we often assume that animal pain is very straightforward. They react when they're hurt. But really, just like in humans, pain in cattle is incredibly multifaceted.
Yeah.
It's shaped by their evolution, their social structures, even their individual experiences. It's not just a reflex. It's a whole symphony of neurological and physiological processes.
Okay, so let's dissect this, not just a reflex concept, a little bit further.
Right.
My understanding is that it all kind of starts with these tiny little messengers called nociceptors.
Yeah.
Am I on the right track there?
You are spot on. Nociceptors are these specialized sensory receptors, and they're everywhere in the body, so you find them in the skin, the muscles, organs, you name it.
Wow.
They're like these little miniature alarm bells that go off when they sense potential harm, so a cut or burn, a sprain, anything like that.
Okay.
And here's the kicker. Nociceptors aren't exclusive to mammals.
Oh, really?
So birds, reptiles, fish, even invertebrates have them. They are vital for survival, and they're essentially telling an organism, hey, something's not right here.
Like a this is bad, don't do this again kind of thing.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's say, hypothetically, a cow is walking along and they step on a sharp rock.
Right.
Those nociceptors in their hoof are going to send out a signal.
Yep.
What happens next?
So that signal, which is essentially an electrical impulse, races along nerve fibers to the spinal cord and then ultimately to the brain.
Okay.
And now here's where things get really interesting.
I like where this is going.
We used to believe that this was a purely reflexive pathway, so signal and response out, that's the end of the story.
Yeah.
But more recent research using EEGs, so those brainwave monitors, reveals that a cow's brain doesn't just simply react to these signals, it actually actively processes them.
Oh.
So imagine you're seeing this visual representation of the EEG lighting up like a Christmas tree as the cow's brain is deciphering these pain signals.
Wait a minute, you're telling me we can observe pain happening in a cow's brain?
In a way, yes. There was this one study that was done on calves undergoing dehorning.
Right.
And I'm sure we've all seen those images.
Yeah.
And they found that the EEGs displayed these distinct brain activity patterns that directly correlated with pain. These weren't simple reflexes. These were signs of their brains recognizing, evaluating, and reacting to pain, experiencing it, processing it, just like we do.
That's incredible. And honestly, a little heartbreaking.
Yeah.
You would think with those apparent pain signals that they would make a bigger deal about it.
Right.
Cows have this reputation for being stoic.
Right.
So why do they seem to mask their pain?
Well, that's where this whole cows are masters of disguise aspect comes in. For millions of years, cattle evolved as prey animals.
Right.
So showing pain in the wild is basically advertising yourself as the easiest meal.
Oh, yeah. You're totally right.
Think about a herd of zebra. The one that's limping is going to be the first target for a lion.
Yeah, it's all about survival of the fittest, or in this case, the least visibly in pain.
Exactly. Cattle have evolved to conceal their pain as a survival strategy.
Wow.
And it's not just about dodging predators.
Right.
Even within a herd, showing weakness can impact their social standing.
That's interesting.
So a cow in pain might be less assertive, less competitive for food, and that affects their overall well-being.
So it's like this double-edged sword. They've evolved to hide their pain, which in turn makes it even harder for us to detect and treat.
Exactly.
And it makes you realize we can't rely solely on those visible cues.
Precisely, and that's what I think is so engaging about this.
Yeah.
It demands that we think outside the box when it comes to understanding and managing pain in cattle. We need to be detectives looking beyond the surface.
You've definitely piqued my curiosity, I have to say.
Good.
This is far more intricate than I initially thought. Before we jump into how we even assess and manage cow pain, I want to touch on another point that really struck me, and that's this idea that pain can actually alter how a cow's nervous system functions.
Hmm.
Can you elaborate on central sensitization?
Central sensitization, it's a big term, but it's a really critical concept.
Right.
It's basically the nervous system getting stuck in pain mode.
Like a glitch in the system, a short circuit?
Sort of think of your nervous system as this finely calibrated alarm system.
Okay.
So an injury, let's say you stub your toe,
Ouch.
triggers those nociceptors we talked about
Right.
to send a pain signal to your brain.
That's
That's
true.
your acute pain response.
Makes sense.
But sometimes with persistent or untreated pain, those signals can actually rewire how the spinal cord and brain interpret pain signals in the future. It's like the pain volume gets cranked up and it doesn't always turn back down even when that initial injury has healed.
So even after that stubbed toe stops throbbing, the nervous system is still on high alert?
Exactly.
Like it's stuck remembering the pain?
Precisely, that can lead to something called maladaptive pain, where animals are experiencing pain that's totally blown out of proportion to any actual tissue damage. They become hypersensitive to touch, to movement, even to things that wouldn't normally register as painful.
So it's like their own bodies are working against them.
In a way, yes.
Are there studies showing this happening in cattle?
There was this one study on cows with chronic lameness.
Right. A big problem.
Huge problem, especially in the dairy industry.
Yeah.
And the researchers, they discovered that these cows exhibited signs of central sensitization. They had a lower pain threshold, meaning that less stimulation was required to trigger a pain response.
Interesting.
And they displayed this heightened sensitivity in areas that were totally beyond that initial injury.
So this stoicism that we talked about earlier, maybe it's not them just toughing it out.
Right.
Maybe their bodies are actually trapped in this like relentless cycle of pain.
It's possible.
This is really changing my perspective, I have to say. And it makes you think about those painful procedures that we subject calves to.
Right.
Dehorning castration.
Yeah.
That's got to leave a mark, right?
Absolutely. Calves are particularly susceptible to the long-term effects of pain because their nervous systems are still developing.
They're still learning.
Exactly. Imagine their neural pathways like young saplings,
Okay.
easily bent and shaped by experiences, especially painful ones.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And studies have shown that calves experience pain for weeks after procedures like disbudding.
Weeks?
Weeks.
That's a long time for those little ones to be in discomfort.
It is.
What are the long-term consequences of this early pain exposure?
Think of it this way. Those early pain signals are like these deep grooves that are etched into a young brain,
Right.
creating these pathways that are easily reactivated. So this early pain can actually rewire a calf's nervous system, making them more sensitive to pain later in life.
So a calf that experiences, significant pain early on might grow into a cow that's more sensitive to pain from routine handling or vaccinations.
Potentially. And it's not just physical sensitivity.
Oh, rare.
Early pain can also affect their social behavior, making them more likely to isolate themselves or show signs of anxiety.
Wow.
There's even evidence suggesting that it can impact their stress response,
Oh, wow.
which potentially affects their immune function and their overall health.
So it really does have these long-term ramifications.
It's like a domino effect with pain echoing throughout their lives.
This is heavy stuff. And it's one thing to recognize pain in like a vocal dog or a cat that hides. But if cows are masters of disguise like we've been talking about,
Right.
how do we even begin to assess pain in these animals? It's not like we can just ask them how they're feeling.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's a constant challenge, but it's also a field of active research.
Okay.
And there are some really exciting advancements being made.
Okay. I'm all ears because at this point, I'm starting to feel like I need a crash course in bovine body language just to understand what my patients are experiencing.
Well, we might not be fluent in moo just yet,
Right.
but we can tap into their sensory and cognitive worlds to get a clearer understanding of their pain levels.
All right, lay it on me. How are we measuring pain in cattle these days? Am I picturing a cow hooked up to a high-tech brain scanner?
Not quite yet.
Okay.
While technology definitely plays a role, pain assessment in cattle often begins with a good old-fashioned observation.
Oh.
We're looking for subtle changes in their behavior, decreased movement, a hunched posture, reluctance to lie down.
Okay.
Picture a group of cows. One is standing slightly off, head hung low.
Got it.
These can all be fairly subtle signs.
But we've talked about how stoic cows are, so how do we differentiate those subtle changes from, say, a moody day or a shift in the weather?
That's where it gets really tricky, and we can't rely solely on behavioral cues.
Okay.
We have to be detectives. We have to examine their environment, their production records for more clues.
Like what changes in their feeding patterns, milk production dropping because Bessie isn't feeling her best?
We might look for changes in their feeding habits. Are they eating less? Are they dropping food? Are they chewing their cud less frequently? We might check their milk yield, as pain often leads to a decrease in production. It's like piecing together a puzzle,
Yeah.
using all these different pieces of information to create a more complete picture.
It's like building a case looking for any indication of discomfort.
Exactly.
So we've got behavioral cues, production indicators.
We'd also have some physiological indicators that can provide more objective pain measurements.
Okay, now we're getting into my wheelhouse. Are we talking cortisol levels, heart rate variability, things that spike when an animal is stressed or in pain?
Exactly. Cortisol, that stress hormone, is often elevated in cows that are experiencing pain. Heart rate and respiratory rate can also provide clues.
Right.
Think about how your own heart races when you're hurt.
For sure.
We can even look at their facial expressions.
Wait, cows have specific facial expressions when they're hurting. I'm picturing a cow wincing.
It's more subtle than a full-on wince, but yes,
really?
there's this fascinating area of research that's looking at what's being called the cow pain face.
A cow pain face, that's amazing.
It involves things like tense ears, furrowed brows, even changes in their eye whites.
Wow, who knew?
Imagine a chart detailing all these microexpressions, helping us decode their silent language.
It's like we're cracking a secret code, learning to read these subtle signs of pain. We've got the behavioral cues, the production indicators, the physiological responses. Are we missing anything?
Yeah.
It feels like we're only scratching the surface here.
You're right. There's one more layer to this pain puzzle that we're really just beginning to unravel. And this is where it gets really exciting, at least for a research geek like me, animal cognition.
Animal cognition you're talking about, like literally getting inside a cow's head.
In a sense, yes, we're moving beyond just the physical signs of pain and trying to understand how pain affects a cow's emotional state, their mood, their overall outlook. Imagine being able to see the world through their eyes.
Yeah.
To understand how pain colors their experiences.
Now, you're speaking my language. This is where my inner learner really perks up. So how do you gauge a cow's mood? Do you give them like some sort of bovine personality assessment?
I wish it were that easy. But scientists are developing some really innovative methods to assess a cow's emotional state. And it all boils down to understanding how they learn and make decisions. One fascinating technique is called a cognitive bias test.
Cognitive bias, is that like when you assume all cows love classical music?
Not quite. It's more about how an animal's past experiences, particularly painful ones, can shape their expectations and influence their perception of the world.
Okay, color me intrigued. Walk me through this cognitive bias test. How does it work with cows?
Imagine training a calf to associate different colors with different outcomes. Let's say blue means they're going to get a tasty treat.
Okay.
And yellow means no treat. Once they've learned this association, you introduce a new ambiguous color somewhere between blue and yellow.
Okay, so a greenish color?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, if that calf is feeling optimistic, they're more likely to approach that ambiguous green, hoping for a treat. But if they're feeling pessimistic or down, they're more likely to avoid it, assuming disappointment.
It's like offering them the glass half full, half empty scenario.
Exactly.
Have you actually used this with calves that have experienced pain?
We have one study use this technique with calves that had undergone despudding, and the calves that had been despudded even with pain relief were less likely to approach that ambiguous color. It suggests that that painful experience had made them more pessimistic or negative in their outlook.
Wow, that's profound. It really underscores that, pain isn't just physical. It impacts their entire mental state. Are there other ways to measure this emotional aspect of pain?
There's another technique called a conditioned place preference test. It's based on this idea that animals, including cows, will naturally gravitate towards places that are associated with positive experiences and avoid those that are linked with negative ones. Think about how, some patients hate coming back to the vet clinic.
Right, like how my dog loves hanging out in the kitchen because that's where I keep the treats.
Exactly. So in this study, calves were given a choice between two pens, one where they had previously been disbudded and one where they hadn't guessed which pen they avoided.
I'm going to guess the disbudding pen.
You got it.
This is really painting a clear picture. Pain matters to cows.
It does.
It affects them physically, emotionally, even cognitively. The big question is, what are we doing about it? What's the state of pain management in the cattle industry?
That's the million-dollar question. The good news is that there is a growing awareness of the importance of pain management in cattle vet. Cattle vets are becoming more adept at recognizing those subtle pain signs, and farmers are understanding that keeping their animals comfortable isn't just the ethical thing to do. It actually makes good business sense.
Right. It's like preventative care. A happy cow is a productive cow.
Exactly.
But I imagine there are still some hurdles when it comes to actually implementing effective pain management on the farm.
Absolutely. One of the biggest challenges is the limited availability of pain medications that are specifically approved for use in cattle.
You're kidding. Are you saying there are barely any drugs designed for cow pain relief?
It's true. Unfortunately, while companion animals have this huge range of pain meds, the options for cattle are far more limited.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And this often forces vets to rely on extra label drug use,
Huh.
meaning we're using a drug in a species or for a condition that it's not specifically approved for.
That sounds a little risky.
It can be, and that's why it's crucial for vets to be well-versed in the pharmacokinetics. The potential side effects of these drugs, plus extra label drug use, comes with a whole slew of regulations, paperwork,
Right.
which can be burdensome.
I can imagine. So what's being done to tackle this lack of approved medications?
Well, it's not from lack of interest. Getting a new drug approved for any species, especially a food-producing animal, is a long and expensive process.
Oh, I bet.
It requires these rigorous studies to demonstrate both safety and effectiveness, but the tide is turning, and there's a lot of promising research underway.
That's good to hear. So apart from drug development, what other avenues are there for reducing pain in cattle?
Well, scientists are exploring ways to breed cattle that are genetically less susceptible to painful conditions. For example, polled cattle, which are born without horns,
Oh, right.
eliminate the need for disbudding altogether.
That's incredible. It's like we're using science to breed out pain.
In a way.
What other innovations are on the horizon?
There's growing interest in non-pharmaceutical pain management approaches, things like acupuncture and massage therapy, which have shown some promise in reducing pain and stress in cattle.
Acupuncture on a cow. Now, that's an image I never thought I'd consider, but hey, if it benefits the animal, I'm all for it.
Right.
So what's the main takeaway for our listeners today?
The biggest takeaway is simple pain matters to cows.
Yeah,
As veterinary professionals, it's our duty to recognize, understand, and manage it effectively.
I couldn't agree more. We've gone from viewing cow pain as, this is a pretty straightforward issue to recognizing it as this complex interplay of biology, behavior, and even emotions. It's a whole new frontier in veterinary medicine, one that we can't afford to ignore.
It's an ongoing journey of discovery, and the more we learn, the better we can care for these animals.
And on that note, dear listeners, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the fascinating world of cow pain. We hope this episode has provided you with some valuable insights and a renewed appreciation for the complex lives of these incredible animals from Vet NeuroJar. Keep those minds inspired, hearts light, and tails wagging.